Apparently, being rejected feels like a physical injury. Getting a no is like a bash on the head. Apparently, I started looking into this when I was training a team on how to close an enrolment, which is closing a sale effectively, how to be a little bit more courageous and ask them if they want to go ahead. No pushy sales tactics involved at all. And then what to do then if they are not ready, if it is a no. But rejection, as it turns out, when I was looking into it, it's just a fascinating topic. Most of us would say we're pretty resilient people, especially if you've worked in education for a while. And yet the moment a conversation kind of might involve hearing a no, behaviour can change quite quickly. And I think it's great to become aware of that. And what's interesting is there's actual neuroscience behind this, which gets exciting. Functional MRI studies have shown that the social rejection that we get activates many of the same regions of the brain as physical pain. And actually, if you think about it, you remember that's why we say gutted in English. So it literally feels like you've been punched in the gut when you get that rejection. It's the same sensors. And there's something, according to brain science, the anterior cingulate cortex, if you wanted to know, and the anterior insula. We're getting too scientific maybe, but there was a lady called Naomi Eisenberger and her colleagues at the UCLA that demonstrated this idea years ago. And so how about that? So a no, in very simple terms, can be processed by your brain in a really surprisingly similar way to a physical injury. So when we understand that, actually quite a lot of behaviour in student recruitment actually makes sense. So if the brain predicts something might hurt or be uncomfortable, its job is to quietly nudge us away from that situation before it even happens, right? So we soften the end of conversations and we delay asking for a direct decision. We might offer to send them more information instead. I'll say, I'll email you the information, let me know later. It doesn't feel like avoidance in the moment. It feels kind of polite. And that's another thing. Education is a very polite sector, which is one of the reasons why I love it, of course. Most people working in our sector, particularly in admissions or in sales, don't see themselves really as salespeople, of course. They see themselves as guides and advisors and people helping families make important decisions, because sales is still seen as a bit of a dirty word, whereas we're doing it all the time. But rightly so, we're not doing the hardcore pushy sales at all, but we are businesses, so we do need to start thinking about how to close and what that looks like and how to do it sooner than perhaps we are doing, as long as it's suitable for the person buying, so the family or the student. And our job is to guide towards that decision, to the conversion, rather than avoiding it. And we probably don't realize we're doing some of these things, but we need to do it comfortably for us. So we're going to try and find some ways today. So, but asking directly whether someone wants to enroll or not can feel socially risky, as well as pretty uncomfortable. It's not just a fear of rejection, therefore, it's a fear of appearing pushy or commercial in an environment that prides itself on being thoughtful and obviously child and student focused. But here's the thing I see quite often. You all do such amazing jobs. You run brilliant visits and tours. You have fantastic meetings. Families and students are engaged. They're excited. The conversation's flowing well and the fit is there. And then right at the point where the decision could naturally be explored, you don't ask. You don't ask. So no one is just outright checking. Very few people anyway, it's outright checking that they would like to go ahead, even to the next tiny step, let alone the full shebang of enrolling and parting with money. I mean, the meeting or the tour usually ends with something like, right, here's the information, I'm going to send it to you, and then you can let me know. And of course, sometimes that is actually the right thing to do because they're not ready. And they've told you that they won't be ready for 2 weeks or something. That's fine. And but most would be ready to arrange a quick follow-up or be open to having a call from you next week. The next step doesn't have to be the full conversion, the full go ahead. It doesn't have to be big and scary. It can be a smaller step, but you do have to try to get them along that journey, to get them towards that conversion. And what is funny, really, is, well, funny in terms of this subject, is that we experience rejection constantly. Not just me, right? Surely we all experience rejection all the time. We experience less as we get older because we avoid it. Comfort zone, right? So, but we get rejected all the time. We just don't necessarily interpret it that way. So I'm going to give you an example of email. A very healthy email open rate for a newsletter might be around a good 40%. That's a good rate. Usually more like about 25, 30, depending on your audience. But 40%, let's say 40%, nice, healthy open rate for your email. Everyone's celebrating, thinking that's brilliant. But that means that 60% of your audience who opted in at some point, so it's a warm audience, you're not cold emailing people because we're not allowed to do that anymore. But we don't sit there feeling personally affronted by the 60% that didn't open our email, didn't even bother opening it, let alone reading it or clicking on it. Click-through rates even lower, 1 to 2% usually. So, but these are in your newsletters. So maybe with the transactional ones, the ones that are one-to-one from you to the family or from you to the student, you might get half the replies, and some of them are still going to ghost you. But still, we don't really take it to heart. We kind of play it down. And the reason for that is that silence feels ambiguous rather than personal. It's a bit distant, so we can ignore it. And there's some psychology research that shows people interpret unclear responses, such as ghosting or silence, very differently from directly negative ones. When someone doesn't reply, our brains kind of fill in the softer explanations. Maybe they're busy, maybe they missed it, they're probably having lunch, washing their hair, maybe they'll come back later. It protects the ego, which is exactly what the brain's supposed to do. It's protecting us quite nicely. It's protecting us from that feeling of physical pain, don't forget. So it's doing its job. But asking a parent directly during a tour, for example, or after a tour, or after a meeting, whether they would like to move forward feels completely different. Now it's immediate and visible and almost personal. You've spent time together now. So your brain is treating it as a social risk. So we're actually pretty comfortable with what you might call silent rejection all day long. Like, we're not going to lose sleep over someone not replying to an email. And yet visible rejection, or in-person rejection even, feels uncomfortable, even though that's the interactions that actually will move a decision forward. This is probably a good time to mention the chimp. Is it the chimp paradox? Can't remember who wrote that, but your big chimp is deciding what's going to happen. But that no that you're getting is going to sting for about 5 seconds. Not very long at all. It's really useful information though. And it might be that they say no because of price, of timing, of location, of whatever it might be. But you're getting information then, which is really useful. Doesn't mean to say it's a no forever. It might be that they're just thinking it's a no for now. They may go away and mull it over and come back, but you then have the information that you need. Okay, without asking directly though, you're never going to learn that barrier. You've not got a chance of learning that barrier, and it won't set the next step in their journey with you. Another piece of psychology that shows up in school decisions is loss aversion. You've probably heard of this. People are just not choosing a school or a program. They're trying to avoid choosing the wrong school or program. So it's slightly different. They're not just choosing the school, they're trying to choose the best school and avoid making a mistake. Okay, and then research by, I think they're called Kahneman and Tversky, shows losses feel roughly twice as powerful as gains. So the risk of making the wrong choice is quite acute. It's a worry, and it often can cause delay. If the school doesn't help, or if you don't help structure that next step for them, then the safest option psychologically is to actually do nothing for a while. So our job, therefore, must be to make that next step comfortable, still moving forward, comfortable, forward with forward motion, and maybe breaking it down into smaller steps. So not saying, are you ready to enroll as soon as they've finished doing a tour, or are you ready to buy moments after chatting to them? But maybe the next step is a slightly smaller one that is more comfortable to them. And don't forget, during consultations, during tours, during visits, there's a cognitive overload happening. People are absorbing an enormous amount of information all at once. So academic results, pastoral care, accommodation, fees, locations, logistics, their own reaction, their child's reaction, thinking about how someone else might react. It's quite a lot, isn't it? No wonder we're all anxious. And obviously travel plans in with that as well, if they're traveling from overseas. So when the brain is overloaded, decision-making slows down, or we don't trust it as much. With such an important decision, we have to have that trust there in ourselves. So if your meeting or your consultation ends with a completely open, let us know what you think, you've probably handed all of that mental load straight back to them, which isn't fair, because I reckon if they're spending money with you, you need to make that next step easy and pleasurable, make them want to take it, make it comfortable for them. Saying, do you have any questions, puts the ball firmly back in their court, whereas you are supposed to be their guide along this journey, remember? So, this is where though, teams selling education just sometimes assume that asking for that next step will feel pushy, when in reality, it can actually lessen the stress for the family, which is a good thing, right? So we're helping them. And there are ways to do it that feel entirely natural. Would you do it? My question, I guess, is would you do it? Would you ask for that mini close or the close if we could do it in a way that felt natural and comfortable to everybody? Probably, right? Because who wants to do loads more follow-up and loads more admin, kind of following up and saying, oh, we made a decision yet, and not getting through and blah, blah, blah. Like, it just speeds up the process. In a comfortable way. We're not pushing anybody anywhere. But one of the easiest ways of doing this is to offer two possible next steps rather than forcing a yes or no decision. People, there's research in this, people find it easier to choose between options rather than responding to an open question. So we need to make it easier for them. As I said, go and have a look at your past emails. Are you setting out a clear next step? I did a podcast chat about this already, just in that little email sign off. Let's make it easier for them in that. Set a very clear next step or choice of two next steps. So instead of a hard close, like a yes or no, or you want to go ahead or not, which might just feel uncomfortable, maybe it would sound a bit more like, I don't know, would it help if we went over the fees or pricing together now? Should we go through that? Or should we double check, the blah, blah options first, accommodation options, for example? Or perhaps we can start an application now if you're ready. Or if you're not, if you prefer, what we can do is go through a few of the options, and then I can call you sometime next week and we can go through it then. Which is best for you. So you're still progressing. You're not pushing towards a close, you're pushing towards a next step, which is good for them too. And even if they say no to one of those questions, finding out why, not just taking a breath and finding out why, rather than taking it as a personal rejection, will be useful. But we need to move things forward. And neither of those questions felt aggressive, did they? So, but what I find really fascinating is that avoidance of closing just really looks dramatic. And I love a bit of drama. But nobody's actually ever said to me, I'm avoiding the close, I'm avoiding asking. But many people do. So you're not alone in this. And it's usually just small decisions that we need to close on. And it's small decisions that we're making every day already to avoid it without realizing. So I'm going to try and call you out on it. Are you sending another email instead of giving them a call? Are you sending them more information on or the brochure or whatever it might be, instead of asking them a question and engaging them? Are you sending, another, information newsletter rather than giving them a call and seeing how they're doing with their decision making? And even if they've found somewhere else, it's great PR, right? But over time, all those small choices that you're making to kind of avoid asking for the sale, they're quietly reducing your conversion rate without anyone really going to be able to pick up why. So it's a small change. So the reframe I'm going to offer you is this. Asking for the next step isn't about hard selling. It's about helping these lovely people make an important decision. clarity, we value clarity. Clarity reduces that uncertainty in such a big decision. Guidance reduces delay. And sometimes the most helpful thing that we can offer after a great visit or meeting is just to simply check where they are in their thinking. If they're ready, you've helped them move forward. And if they're not, you've learned something valuable instead of guessing, and potentially set up the next step for progression if they're ready. You can go back over their questions or schedule that next step. Not a biggie, but it does take a little bit of courage. Asking for the next step takes a little bit of courage. So are you going to take this on? I'm going to give you two little things to help, actually, that you can do now. You can try this and potentially progress a few more people along the pipeline. And sometimes that's all we need to tip that conversion rate up a little bit. So number one, decide the next step options in advance that you want. So for example, if they need to register or pay a deposit, agree to, they can either do that, like, do you want to go ahead and give us some money? There is that. Or you could be, you could say, well, these are the prices. Let's walk through that. Shall we go over that again? Or would you like to go over accommodation options or whatever it might be? But whatever those steps are, write them down. So try and get 4 or 5 of them down, mini steps, mini steps, as well as the big one. Because sometimes we can ask for the big one, right? Number 2, prepare some lines around those. So for example, we can go through the fees together now, if you like. Or I can call you tomorrow once you've spoken as a family, and we can then go through it together next week, maybe, if tomorrow's too soon. So there's that. Or it could be, we can get that started right now. If you're ready, we can get that application started right now. And if they say, oh no, say, well, take it anyway. Here's the information. Why don't I give you a call in a few days and go over it with you and see if you need anything? What about maybe next Wednesday? That enough time, do you think? Then you can go over it. If you've got any questions, we can have a look at them then. Okay, so these are just still progressing. They're not hard selling. But it will feel a little bit uncomfortable if you're used to just giving the information and running away, avoiding that rejection. But go and try it. Go and try a mini close in your next conversation. Progressing that inquiry along the pipeline towards a close is the aim, right? So rejection is still going to happen because, none of you convert at 100%. More's the pity, but then I'd be out of a job, I guess. But rejection is going to happen. But at least let's make it a useful rejection. Let's at least try. I think it was Wayne Gretzky that says, and there's a funny scene in the American Office series where it says, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. What if you were a little bit braver and you asked that question, and then you got a few more people signing up or buying or whatever it is you wanted them to do at that time? You've saved yourself a load of work. This is like lazy girl selling, right? You've saved yourself a load of work, but also you've given them the chance to go ahead. You're inviting them to join the school. That's a lovely thing to be able to offer them. It's not a bad thing. That's why they're there, to find out if it's a fit. So a much better approach, I think I'm saying, is to treat a no as information and stay curious. Try to realize it's not actually a kick in the guts. Just be aware of your brain and your ego trying to protect you. You can simply ask, is that a no for now, or is this school or program completely not a fit at all? And that question can often open the door to a completely different conversation, right? And sometimes they just need time. Sometimes they need a different start date. Sometimes they're waiting for someone else to come into the mix, in which case you just need to know, and then you deal with it in a particular way moving forward. We're still trying to progress them. And even if it's a no, never, ever, ever, please leave me alone, then they can move out of your pipeline and you can focus your time and your follow-up on those that might well convert. So in other words, rejection isn't physical pain. So just be aware of your brain playing tricks on you there. And the no doesn't have to be the end of the relationship, the end of the conversation. Quite often, it's just the point where the real conversation starts and the conversion proceeds. So good luck with that. Let me know how you get on. Thanks for listening.